This is Rocky Snyder. At the tone, leave your name and message and I'll get back to you.
My name is Olympia, I'm 17, I'm just a regular suburban chick, and I am addicted to pretending to be furniture. It stems from one sort of Christmas my Aunt Rosemary sat on me.
In this episode of the RockFit Files, I dive right in with Marion McRae, Australian physiotherapist. But don't call her that. She's a movement addict. What title do you go by with your work? There's so many, right? How do you explain what it is you do?
Yeah, I really struggle with that myself. I label myself as a movement addict.
Nice.
And yeah, I really try not to pinhole it because there's so many things I've studied. And I guess most people locally know me as a physio, even though the way I practice is very non-mainstream physio-like. So yeah, it's a tough one. I struggle with that myself. So I just tend to, depending on who the audience is, choose a label that I guess resonates best with what they're expecting from me. But I'm like anyone, I'm many things. I'm not one thing. But yeah, labels are hard. I haven't come up with that myself yet.
Well, they also create limitations. Well, I can't say as I have a specific title. I mean, a biomechanic, maybe, like working on the body, but working with the body rather than on it. Movement specialist. Our T-shirts at work will say certified strength and movement specialist or team trainer, but there's nothing that really encompasses it all. So I just say I'm a movement specialist. So that's more or less how I kind of position myself. Yeah.
Well, movement is one of my major tools, but I guess I spend a lot of time in terms of I've created what I call a hierarchy of influence in terms of where I feel most effects happen. And I would definitely, I believe the emotional structure has hierarchy. So I've seen a lot of people who move well, eat well, sleep well, but they're miserable. And their bodies reflect that. You know, they have illness, they have disease. And then I see other people who don't move much, they have horrendous skeletal structures, but they're super happy, they're super invested in a calling in life, and they don't have any poor health. So by virtue of that, I've come to believe that, you know, whilst our structure and our movement patterns are super important, and certainly there's a two-way feedback loop, at the end of the day, if you're happy, you're usually healthy. And if you're unhappy, you're usually unwell. So I spend just as much time helping people identify their emotional addictions and giving them training strategies for up-leveling them. So where does that fit into a label? I don't know, but yeah, so it's like you would be, the person in front of you dictates the toolbox that you draw from. And I think the skill of any therapist is having a diverse toolbox and then really knowing for that person in front of you for that stage of their life what the most effective way forward is. And you know, I laugh in my own days. Some days I'm rolling around on the floor. We're doing trauma release work through movement with someone. Other days I'm hook them up to the heart math, heart rate variability monitor, and we're looking at their heart-brain coherence. So I've got lots of different tools depending on what I feel someone needs. And then, you know, obviously there's a lot of work with feet, and Gary's work is a huge part of what I do. So no one, how do you articulate that in a website? It's quite tricky. So at the end of the day, my business motto is we have strategies to help you think, feel, and move better. And that's really what I'm interested in.
Wonderful. How long have you been doing this?
Doing it well or doing it?
No, doing it well. We'll come back to that. But just when did you get started? And what inspired you to start this path?
Right. To be honest, I kind of fell into physio. I knew I wanted a job that involved moving. I didn't want to be stuck behind a desk. So I just thought, I actually applied to the police force, and I was too young at the time. So they said, come back in a year. And in the interim, I got into physio. And I really didn't have much of an idea what physios did. I knew they worked with sports teams, and I thought that was pretty cool because I was quite a sporty kid. And then when I went to uni, I realised, the diversity of physiotherapy. They do a lot with stroke rehab and kids and lungs and all these many areas. But really, I was most interested in the musculoskeletal side of sports injuries. So, got out, went straight into private practice because I didn't want to be in the hospital scene, and had some pretty unsuccessful years, I would say. I think I was thrown into a very busy practice, 4 patients an hour.
Oh.
Everyone had a TENS and a hot pack. There was no time to assess anyone. It was, and so consequently, no one responded well. And I was very disillusioned with the profession. And I went off traveling, went to the UK. I got a job in the NHS, and, all of a sudden I had 40 minutes with a new patient, and I didn't know what to do with them. I hadn't practiced any of my assessment skills. So I kind of thought, oh, gosh, I've got the luxury of time here. I might actually start assessing things properly. And, things started to shift. I thought, wow, if you actually assess something properly, there's an outcome that can follow. And so then I was a bit more invested back into the profession. But I still just still felt like we were missing a lot. It was not about the body. I could see people were unhappy or pissed off at the world or stuck in relationships they didn't enjoy. And that to me was the issue as to why they weren't healing. It wasn't the injury. The injury was a feedback for something deeper. So then I told myself, well, that's okay. I can still have an effect on those other things via the body. So the body's the portal. I can sort of, through my words and my questioning, perhaps help the people shift something within themselves that helps them move forward or identify what the real issue is. So I suppose I went a lot more into mind-body healing, mind connection, Tony Robbins, all the life coach questioning, and developed all those skills. But then I think I went too far in that direction, and I didn't really place as much emphasis on the structure. So it's been this, like anything career, you go headlong in one direction, you realize you probably overwent, you pull back, you go down another rabbit hole. And I just go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole because I'm curious and I love to learn. And at the end of the day, you start seeing some overlaps and putting it all together and building your own philosophy and your own approach as to how you feel this beautiful body of ours works. And found some good mentors who really shifted things again. And at the end of the day, actually set the intention probably about 8 years ago now that during this lifetime, I wanted to master what I did. And I would say that's a lifelong mission, really, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Mastery.
I'm reminded of Aikido, and there is a 30-year throw. And they call it the 30-year throw because that's how long it takes for you to master it. And I look at a lot of the approaches and the elements or the tools that we have at our disposal and think of it the same. I mean, the more it gets revealed as you explore deeper, and then ironically enough, it comes back to the simplicity of what it is you learned at the beginning. But you had to go through that journey, through all the intricacies and the complexities to understand that it really boils down to just a few items.
Yes.
Feeling happy, moving well, and those type of things. So I'm curious, you mentioned mentors, and I'm a big proponent of having mentors, because just because we finish school or uni or wherever, it doesn't mean we stop learning. And it's always good to get a guide or a mentor. So who are some of the most pivotal or most influential mentors that you've had?
Yeah, I get emotional the minute you ask that question. I had a beautiful lady called Ray Martin. She was a Feldenkrais practitioner who was a physiotherapist originally, ran a very successful practice in Perth, and then found Feldenkrais. And I remember hearing in my local neighborhood about this lady who was getting great results with people, you know, and I kept hearing this name come up. Ray did this, and Ray got me better, and Ray yada yada. And I thought, who is this Ray lady? I really need to meet her. And our paths crossed, and it was a really quite a surreal way that they crossed. And I remember I had just the word Feldenkrais had just hit my books, and I thought, what's Feldenkrais? I'll go and read a little bit about it. And as a method, are you familiar, Rocky, with Feldenkrais?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah,
Movement Through Awareness, Moshe's book was phenomenal. It's
yeah,
on my shelf. I enjoy bits and pieces of Feldenkrais and Thomas Hanna's somatics work, and yeah, I've
yeah.
been studying that a bit myself.
Yeah, so I had been a Pilates instructor for, I had a Pilates practice before I moved to where I am now, and I'd taught Pilates for about 8 years. And I had, without knowing, and I had a very rigid idea of what quality movement looked like.
Mm.
And then this lady came across my path, and she invited me to a class. And I remember in my first Feldenkrais class, I was so angry. I had this rage within me of, but she's not telling us to do it. She's not telling us how to do it. And, the pelvis is coming out of neutral. And I just, I just remember the rage of, how dare she? What is this? Like, it just pushed every button I had. And I was so razzed up that I couldn't look her in the eye when I left the class. I remember going home and just, I don't know, punching a punching bag. Like, the rage was, and and then I was trying to, well, why am I so angry? Like, what's really triggering this? And it was the idea that I think everything I thought I knew, I didn't.
It
And
shook
I
it shook your concepts of reality or your foundations of logic, didn't it?
completely, and if I didn't have such respect for this lady, I would have chucked her out and said, oh, she doesn't know what she's talking about. See you later. But I couldn't do that because she had such results with people. She was well loved, well respected. And I thought, man, I'm going to have to just go back to basics. So I'm just going to have to chuck all that out and start from scratch. And, so I did. And we became great friends. But it was always this ongoing challenge. I was very addicted to strength and muscles, and things had to be hard. And here she was, loose and flowing, and do it how you feel like you want to do it. And it was just like we were polar opposites. But I loved a bit. She just changed everything for me because she taught me the value of self-directed learning. How dare we imprint a way of moving on someone? That's, their body is ultimately more intelligent than anything we think or know. So all these Feldenkrais philosophies just smacked me. And once I opened to them, I just ran with them. I could see the superiority of them over what I thought I had known. And so she was the prime influence, really. And she passed away. We went to a Sydney Feldenkrais. It was a movement intelligence 2-day event, all about how to move in a chair. Would you believe? 2 days of Feldenkrais processes in a chair, seeing the chair as a window of opportunity for movement. And I remember thinking, how the hell are we going to spend 2 days? But and all these Feldenkrais people were they had such heightened interoception. They could feel everything. And I was coming at it from a athletic perspective of having trained to feel nothing, push, because you can go harder if you don't feel as much. So I had, on a personal level, trained my interoception down to the point of I had none, and that had helped me perform athletically. But it, ultimately, it was not serving me well. So I would sit in this room and they'd feel everything, the subtlest shift. Oh, feel that, and I would be sitting there. No, actually, I don't feel anything. I don't know what you're talking about. I thought they were making it up. I thought they were all feeding off each other, and I was the ultimate skeptic. But I think after about 3 hours of sitting in this chair, I finally felt something, and it was like, it went from being this intellectual knowing, as Chris talks about a lot, to an experience in my body, and that completely changes things. So yeah,
I
after that,
love
I was
that. I love it on so many levels. I don't really delve into the spiritual side in my conversations with people in this kind of venue, but uh, things that you said just struck a chord. Like there was this rigidity within your movement, and there were certain parameters that you were not willing to let go of until a point came where you had to surrender. And I mean, I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can do as an individual is to admit that we are not powerful, but we are powerless. And the only thing we have power over is our attitude. And to be able to let go and to surrender to that allows you to actually have even greater freedom, which is
definitely,
wonderful.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So obviously quite a pivotal person in your life. So let's just transition over to anatomy and motion. Like where did that come into play? What how did that come into your life? Because honestly, there's just a small cadre of us worldwide who have been gifted the ability to learn through these courses. And although there are more and more people every day, every week that are learning more, but honestly, it's not one of those mainstream types of things, even to the level of Feldenkrais or Ida Rolf's work or Pilates, obviously. So what brought you there?
Well, it's funny. The first Feldenkrais sense that I actually felt something was a foot drill. We were barefoot, standing, feeling pelvic movement, and it was the first time I sensed a difference between left and right. And that felt sense was, okay, I'm starting to get this. And so then I became curious about this concept of how we weight bear on our feet. And so I did what I do, went to YouTube. These days for me, it's YouTube because a lot of people are speaking to you, they're demonstrating. It's a really great tool for therapists, for manual techniques as well. And there's a lot of cool people out there who they're not recognized, but they have some quality to offer. And I came across one of Gary's videos, and I think he was just demonstrating something to do with this concept that if we don't weight bear equally between both feet, between front and back, there's ripple effects in the body. And I thought, okay, this is the stuff I'm looking at, and this is what I want to know more about. Went to his website, just kept. I think I tried to find as much about his stuff as I could, and then eventually went to Melbourne and did the course. And there I found mentor number 2 and 3, Chris and Gary. Like, wow, again, huge. I think the first time I did the course, it was very much an intellectual, trying to understand the concepts and the language. And then the second time I did the course, it was more about putting it into my own body and having those experiences and understanding what I personally was doing. So I'm glad I did it twice, and if they ever come back, I'll do it again. It's a fundamental, simple concept, but again, a little bit of anger because here I am, a physio, 4 years taught at university, and I wasn't taught the basic concept that if someone's shifted 60% of body weight on their right leg, what leg's going to wear out first? What hip's going to wear out? What knee's going to wear out? We get taught these complicated assessment protocols that at the end of the day ignore the basics. And so I suppose I had, again, a little bit of reactionary anger towards my teaching institutions and the establishment about what's still being taught at university. And, from my perspective, it's Gary's course and the people who've done it, people like yourself, they know more about assessing movement and dysfunction than 90% of the physios I know. And that's sad for me as a physio in my profession. I feel we need to up level a lot And I would love to see the AIM mode of assessment become the mode of assessment for assessing musculoskeletal dynamics, because we chop each little joint down into one thing and assess it, but we don't put it back into the global system and see how it moves dynamically. And that's really the issue. So there's still time for that to happen, isn't there? I'm not dead yet.
No, far from it. I was curious at what your emotional response to the first course was, if you were going to have some type of uh, frustration, maybe pent up anger or anything like that, but not directly at the instructors so much as your own educational path that you took through a more formal institution.
But I'd already kind of come to Gary's idea before going, so I was super open to that. Chris obviously challenged me quite a lot, and still does.
How so?
Well, he's a deep philosophical thinker, as I guess I like to perhaps overanalyze things. But I loved that. I loved that my thinking was being challenged, because you don't get it very often. And whilst I could take Gary's nuts and bolts and process it and yep, got it, what I enjoyed equally in the course was the philosophy of applying the model. And it fits so much with the Feldenkrais ideas. I could see so much of the other tools I had could be integrated beautifully into the model. So it wasn't an idea of having to throw everything out. It was now I see how that fits there and that fits there. Especially the fascial manipulation and some of the postural neurology ideas, they could all be integrated into the model. But Chris's questioning of standard thinking procedures and wanting us to become objective in our thinking, that was a really good lesson for me. But I had reactionary responses to that, definitely. And probably still do at times, but it's always good. I know when he's triggered something, because I think, oh, he's got something there. What's going on? So, as a team, I think they're far superior than either one of them individually. The fact they've come together to teach is just perfection.
Now, speaking of team, do you have colleagues in your business, or in your studio, your facility, clinic, that have gone through the same work, or that you've shared this information with, or how is it with
Well,
you?
I've sort of scaled. So my business is called Movement Solutions. The concept being, most of our solutions, whether it be for your emotional, mental, or physical health, have a basis in movement. And so we had aerial yoga, we had quite a few, we had kids yoga, we had different things going on. And then I moved spaces in COVID now to a more serene, quieter part-time clinic for myself. So people come and go. But no, the frustration I have is that it's hard to replicate, I guess, me. And I've had physios interested but not committed, not committed to actually going and doing the course. And that I can't, there's no cohesion in our approach if their fundamental philosophy of how they view the body is different. So yeah, I've just opted to work the time I want to work, and scale, keep it simple basically, rather than scale up, because I couldn't find staff that I wasn't happy with the quality of what they were offering.
Was there too much rigidity kind of in looking at the people coming in? Because I see there's a certain kind of thought process and protocol reinforced in American physical therapy, that there is certain treatment protocols based on the symptom that they're coming in for. Do you find the same thing with the physios in Australia?
Yeah, I'd like to think it's evolving, and it's a bit like anything. There's always these rare individuals who go and do more and are open to more. But the real thing I struggle with is someone teaching movement who doesn't move themselves, or who hasn't spent the time putting it into their own bodies. I had an exercise physiologist in here who I work with a fair bit, and I think she's amazing. But I was quite shocked at her movement patterns. And while she was strong, she was, there was a lot that was missing in her system. And it quite shocked me that, we assume that people who move a lot move well, but they don't. And so by virtue of the fact they're moving a lot, they can lock in some pretty bad stuff. And yeah, I think that I feel to be a good teacher of something, you need to have embodied it yourself. You need to have experienced it yourself. And that makes you a better teacher, I would think. So, yeah, I think they're few and far between. And I can only control what I bring to someone. And I don't necessarily want to be responsible for what someone else brings to someone. Yeah, ultimately it came down to that, I think.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm going to go off on a tangent, kind of off to a wild side here, because you brought up the emotional component that is often the determinant on how somebody will live in their body. And if you go through the emotional realm and try to address those issues, a lot of the other things have a tendency of cleaning up. So taking into consideration the flow motion model,
Yeah.
and knowing that there's relationships with joints and postural positions, have you found certain emotions that go along with maybe certain movement patterns, certain phases of gait? And I bring this up because I remember many years back, I was training with or teaching under Thomas Myers with anatomy training.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
The anatomy lines. Yeah.
Yes,
The train.
and Tom was talking when we were looking at people's posture. He was saying, okay, before you begin telling me what shoulder is higher, what the spine is doing, and so on, I want you to look at the person and see if you can get a better understanding of who that person is just by how they hold themselves. And that was one of the most brilliant moments in the entire course, because I can't unsee that now. And now, even with like the force plate of seeing more mass in the forefeet, might give somebody a sense that, wow, this person is just ready to just go forward, compared to somebody that is pulled back into their rear feet, that may be more stubborn or more not grounded, but just not willing to go forward. Do you notice that with your emotional work?
Yeah, I've gone around roundabouts with all of those things. And I had a personal experience on one of the courses where we were working on shift, and it was a lateral line opening. And I was only open because someone pushed me there with 2 fingers, and I went, whoa. And at the time I remember thinking, whoa, wow, something let go then. And went back to the class, walking home that day, just started bawling, absolutely bawling. And I wouldn't say I don't cry much, but I was sobbing. And I knew intuitively it was related to that opening of that lateral line. And it was all to do with, if you talk to Tom and some of Tom's teachers about which line represents which emotion, and certainly the deep front line is all about primal fear-based things. Lateral line tends to be about boundaries. So spiral line is something else. They all represent different emotional concepts. So I've experienced the release of emotion from stored tissue, or emotion stored in tissues that all of a sudden move in a new way. I think that's our fascial system in a nutshell. It's our embodied emotional system. And it's the interoceptive centers. It's such an innovated structure, fascia. And that's the idea, is that it is what is embodying and storing our emotional memories. And when you move that tissue in new ways, new experiences, old ones that were holding release, but opens you to feel new things. So it's completely this question of where does the mind end and the body stop? Where's that divide? Nothing is divided, it's all one. And so when we're dealing with a physical body, we are dealing with a mind and an emotional center, whether we appreciate it or not. And everything influences everything. It's up, down, left, right. It's all interconnected. There's no separation. And So we think we're doing things, but do we actually know what we're doing? So, you know, a lot of the times I actually treat fairly intuitively. I get out of my brain and I feel and I listen and I'm guided. And that's a very non-scientific approach. But I feel I've got the scientific tools there, which my guidance can pull for me. And so I actually hand over a lot of the thinking and go straight into the feeling, what's appropriate. And, you know,
Was that hard to embrace? Being so linear and so scientific and so analytical, such the athlete, and push through like you've all described thus far. It must have at what point in time did you just allow yourself to just say, okay, I'm just going to let whatever happens happen?
I just realized that I would, you know, I'd work an 8-hour day and I'd come away and I wouldn't have had one other thought about anything in my world. When I'm with people, I'm so lost in time. I constantly run over time because I'm there, I'm present. And it's like I've heard you say, it's like a puzzle. It's like, wow, if I, you know, and I see the people that come through my door as the gifts for me. They're teaching me something. Every single person is teaching me a nugget. And it's like, wow. Every patient, I'm like, wow, like, wow. And that's, I guess, the beauty of what we do. But it's also, I realized I was in the flow state at work constantly. There's just a flow state that happens. And it wasn't until I've actually recently done some channeling courses. Now we're getting out there, which I realize, again, that's just another part of the brain. It's just another part that needs to be opened if you feel called to do it. And after having experienced channeling, I realized, my God, what I'm doing at work is just channeled intuition. Like there's a structure, but there's also then just an acknowledgement that by Tom's saying, by reading the body, the subtle cues, the subtle eye movements, the breath, all the indicators are there. And we have an ability as humans to sense and feel all those things in others if we open to it. And that's just a reflection and a guided process. So yeah, it's hard to describe, but I have the practical, but I also have the intuitive. And I think the merging of the two is quite valuable.
Amazing. Yeah, I can appreciate that. When there's moments where I'm working with somebody and I am determined to think it through, I get further and further away from being effective. And as soon as I feel that inner conflict or just I feel myself just trying to make something happen, recognize it in that moment, that's when I just say, okay, let that go. What do you see in front of you? What does the person want to do? Where do they want to go? Where don't they want to go? Just start answering the basics and let's just start building from there. And as soon as I do and follow that without any kind of plan in mind, it's amazing how it changes.
Yeah, and I think the fact you have that awareness to realize when you're pushing is a huge thing, isn't it? Because the minute there's resistance introduced, there's resistance. And a lot of well-being is figuring out where our resistance is and letting it go. You know, this idea that we have to work hard to be healthy, it shits me. We're unhealthy because we have all these belief systems that keep us unhealthy. So well-being is our natural state, you know. And I guess I'm eternally frustrated by the idea that health takes work. I think we were born beautiful, healthy, well-being, whole people. And it's only these ideas that get fed into us that limit us in our beliefs about what's possible for our own bodies and what they can do. And I guess that's part of my the ultra running is, you know, the idea that ultra runners have to suffer. Like, no. The idea that that running injuries are part of running, no. Run because it feels good. Run because you love it. Find a way to move that feels good, and just you could do it for hours, you know. I mean, Helen Hall is just I love her ideas, about the book she wrote. I wish I'd written. It's just that idea of efficient movement is part of our soul's natural expression, and when you find a way to do it in nature, it's well, for me, it's what lights me up, and I want other people to experience that. And when they can't, I see the effects of it on their mental health, on their relationships, and I guess that's where the back thing came in, the passion with back pain, because if any injury creates more dysfunction and heartache for people, it's chronic persistent back pain. And so I guess that's where I've chosen to focus my energies, in terms of how do we actually change something before we pass, and that would be it for me.
Was that because you were starting to get a high influx of people with chronic back issues, or was it what inspired you to start really focusing on that aspect?
I think it was personal experience of living with an ex-husband who suffered chronic low back pain for years, and seeing the effects of that not only on him but on myself and on our kids and all around him, and trying to read every book on the topic and trying to find that magic piece of the puzzle that would flick something in his brain to help him shift forward. And I failed miserably, and that's okay. It wasn't for me to, that's his journey. So I think it's the lived experience of it which made me so passionate about it.
Tell me about failure though, because that's interesting that we don't really talk about the clients or the patients, depending upon your approach. We typically will get the shining testimonials like, oh my gosh, I've gone to everybody under the sun and he was with me for 20 minutes or she was with me for 15 and suddenly I could walk again. We don't really put the posts or accolades up for, I had no idea what to do with this person, or I felt completely beside myself, that I just was not effective. Like, it doesn't, fortunately, I don't believe it happens for you or myself as often as maybe in the past, because we get more proficient with what we're doing. But what
Mm.
is that like?
I I definitely think there's a time when people are ready, and I think I've got better over the years of recognizing that person in front of me when they're not ready. And I think personally, I've learned to not invest much energy in that person, because I've made an assessment that they're not ready right now, for maybe
What
for
gives you
my
that
approach.
idea? What
Pardon?
what what tells you that? What can you, are there anything
Um,
that,
yeah, their language, their need to stick to the story they've had for many years, and their response to being challenged on that story and how they take that. I mean, we've all had those patients that come in and say, well, I was in a car accident when I was 15 and I need to have chiropractic 3 times a week, otherwise I'll end up in a wheelchair. Like, far out. I've had the odd patient like that, and I have said, well, that's not my belief for you. You know, I see that as a story you're telling yourself, and I think that story is keeping you exactly where you need to be. And I don't buy into that. So are you willing to move on that story? Are you willing to open to the possibility that some change could be possible for yourself? And if they're not, they'll say, no, I'm not. Okay, well, I'm not for you. Like, if our core belief is different, well, I believe they can improve, they don't, I can't do anything to overcome that. I mean, I could argue for helping them see potentially, possibly, why something might shift in the direction towards feeling better. But if their core belief is whatever they're coming to see me about cannot heal, then I can't work with them, because that's my core belief. And I'm not judging their beliefs. I just got to know who I can work with and who I can't. And, you know, that's just basic for me self-preservation of my energy because I choose to work with people who have a belief structure that supports improvement. And there's a core fact, there's just people who will come into this world and experience this journey, and it will be rough, right, for them. and it's the fixed mindset, growth mindset methodology of how our brains process things. And, I've observed, and some people are just fixed in what they need to be fixed in. And I mean, who's not to say that's appropriate for what they're triggering in people around them? So on a soul level, I get it. I get that not everyone has to be bright and shiny and healthy. And in fact, being depressed, in pain, chronically ill, that might be their particular journey in this world, this lifetime. And again, that's cool. That might be what it needs to be this time around. So I guess I get a bit more selective about who I see. Purely for my own sense of satisfaction in what I do.
So speaking of what you do, let's just say that I'm one of your patients slash clients coming
Yeah.
in with some type of symptom, chronic
Yeah.
or acute. What
Yeah.
would that look like? Like coming into your clinic, what would that be like?
Well, I'd talk to you. I'd say, Rocky, tell me about how you feel I can help you. And you would tell a bit of a story, it hurts here, or I did it this way. So I do a bit of a subjective questioning. And then a lot of it is, okay, come up and stand for me. Usually I start every session with someone just standing in front of me, barefoot, with their eyes closed. And I will say, in this moment, tell me what you're feeling within your body. Tell me what your nervous system most wants you to notice right now as you stand there. And that's really interesting, because often they've come for, say, their shoulder, and they're like, oh my God, my left hip's killing me. Like as I stand here right now, like, wow, I hadn't even noticed that. So we could go anywhere from there. But so it could be a very aim-based assessment. Okay, let's go through your pelvic movements. I've already eyeballed them, have an idea that they're off axis, they're on axis, there might be a tilt, the rib cage might be rotated, what's the hips doing, so I'll go through all that, and I'll have them sense and feel their foot pressures, their pelvic motions. I get an idea of what their feet can actually do. So if my assessment, after talking to them, observing them, hearing their language, if my assessment is that there's a mental block in terms of their conscious thinking or their subconscious beliefs, we might go there first, because I have that real issue. If they don't believe they can heal, it wouldn't matter how amazing I am, they're not going to make any progress. So that might be what we hit head on. But rarely I get that these days. Often I get people who are like, yeah, no, I'm keen, I'm going to, so often we don't have to go there much anymore. And, part of, after we've done a bit of a structural assessment, is, I will simply say 1 to 10 on an average day, 10 super happy, 1 super miserable. Where do you tend to hang out most often? What sort of emotions do you experience most often, most frequently in your body? And that's an open-ended question, where some people will then admit to being either too stressed, quite depressed, quite anxious, and we'll have a chat about their emotions and the biochemistry of healing, and how, if it's cortisol, that's feeding inflammation. If there's no love, if they're not experiencing any love, there's no oxytocin. So we will have a bit of a chat practically about the emotional state and how that's affecting their blood. And then we might combine it all into one little movement drill that they go and practice. And I keep it really simple in terms of movement. I'll find one thing that's missing, and we start with that one thing. But I'll make that one thing whatever I perceive to be is going to give them the biggest bang for their buck. And
Do you tie an emotion or an affirmation or some type of thought with the movement?
More I'll just have them, if it's a supine cog, for instance, while they're doing the scanning of their pressures into the body, I'll just have them take a moment to just, what am I feeling right now? Do I even have a language for my emotions? Certainly when I started this work, I was working off about 4 words. I was either overwhelmed, angry, happy, or sad. Oh no, guilt was in there as well. It was a fair bit of guilt. So I kind of had 5 words, and that was it. And I had no idea that there were all these other subtle emotions that, so I've come from being fully numb, fully head-based, no heart activations, to completely the other way. but I think that's great because I get people who are back in the whole numb and disconnected state, and I think they hear it better from someone who's been there, you know. So yeah, we'll just have them notice or feel something, and then sometimes I might say, all right, well, after you've done your little movement awareness drill and you can feel that movement, then I want you to go out and we make a list of 5 things that make them feel better. You know, might be a gin and tonic watching the birds of an afternoon. It might be watching a sunset, a walk in nature, hugging your kids, going for a surf. But it's essentially training them to prioritize that those things are just as important for healing whatever this injury is as the movement. It's equally important. Yeah. So it goes in every different direction, Rocky.
I love it. Honestly, I love that. I feel like I want to get a wall poster that I often see in grade school or kindergarten or even pre-kindergarten, where you have these emotions and these facial expressions going across in columns and rows that kids can just basically connect to. Like, how are you feeling today? Go ahead and point to the poster. It's almost like we lose touch with so many things as we move less or mature, that and they're integral parts of us. I love that you're connecting those two together. There's
a great app called the Mood Meter app. It's $1.80, I think. But you know, it for kids it's super color based. And I tell my adult clients that make sure when you're doing this tracking of your mood, you actually do it in front of your kids, because there's no greater gift you can give your kids than the idea that my emotions are my responsibility. I'm not, you know, and if they see mum pull out their phone, what are you doing, mum? Oh, I'm just checking my mood. What do you mean, mum? Well, my physio thinks that if I'm going to heal this injury quicker, I need to feel better more often. You know, and it simply says, what am I feeling right now? And it has the faces, it has the colors, and then you track it. And then it's a simple question of, okay, do you want to shift from where you are now? Do you want to sort of move forward, or do you want to stay where you are? There's no judgment about any of it. It's just this idea of they matter and we've got to be aware of them more often. And, you know, if we look at frequency of tissue, there's a whole scale. Emotions have a frequency, and cellular mechanics are affected by the emotion that you're hanging out in. You know, the very fact that love on that frequency is the Hawkins Scale of frequency, I think it's called. Love is the highest frequency of cellular oscillation. Guilt, anger, sadness is about 30 hertz. Love sitting on about 500 and something hertz. So, you know, like you said before, we could bring it back down to this concept of simplicity. Just love. If you love more often, your cells go off the charts. Yeah. And love your body. Love the injuries. Love the challenges they present. Love the opportunities they create.
Well, that's been a wonderful paradigm shift mentally for me. And I think primarily through Chris's coaching, is talking about these are all ways in which the body is continually trying to negotiate or create strategies to allow you to do what it is you're doing. And there is no bad part of the body. It's just that it's trying its best to do what you need, and it's taking on a lot of the work. And by having that kind of thought when looking at somebody move, it just changes how you see them, right? It's something. Speaking of watching people move, here's what I would like to kind of not finish with, because I could go forever talking to you here, but I want to respect your time. But what I have noticed, and I'm wondering about your own experience, is especially within this last year, where for me, a lot of what I've been doing is via internet, and I can't be there to physically feel what is happening at some articulation or soft tissue, and looking at really just witnessing how this person is moving. And I have noticed that Well, how I'll make an analogy. I'm walking down a hallway and I notice that the carpet is a certain color and the walls are a certain type of design, but I don't really pay attention to it. And as I walk further, I suddenly notice that well, the floor has changed. Now it's hardwood floor and the walls have changed color. And then I lose track of that and then I continue down that same hallway and suddenly I'm on plush carpeting with drapes on the walls, and it's just another level of awareness. And that's kind of how I think that watching people move, the more we watch somebody move, the more becomes revealed. So do you have guideposts that you can kind of think about? They may be very vague but whatnot, but do you see, like, looking back at how you used to look at a person move compared to today, what's that journey been like?
I spent, as I said, 8 years, maybe 10 years teaching Pilates. So I had the eye for spotting, and I call it the eye. I think I had a lot of Pilates teachers that worked for me who were super knowledgeable, but didn't have the eye. They couldn't see what I could see. And then I had others that had less training but had an amazing eye. They could see it. So I call it having the eye to see these subtle things. And I don't know how we develop that. I guess are you that person at the cafe that just is addicted to watching how people move? I just do it. One of my favorite things is to sit in that cafe and just look, like, wow, oh, at the variety, at the way walking, at the variety, one foot in front of the other. How many ways that people find ways to achieve that little mission. It's just nuts. And so I guess getting back to your question, I think I have a much better eye because I play in my own body with the subtleties. And so I can feel it in my body so I can see it in others easier. If you've had, felt sense of all these things, it's just, I think it helps you see it in others. But I don't know. I could be wrong on that.
No, I like it. Definitely a nice connection. All right. Marion McRae, Movement Solutions. If we want to explore with you or learn more about what you're doing, what is the best way?
Look, probably just go to the website, which is www.movementsolutions.physio. The podcast links there. I have a blog I write every now and again when I'm inspired to. Sorry, every now and again I have a rant about something. So, I'm really looking to develop my online courses for back pain. I think I haven't come across anyone yet offering the mental, the physical, and the emotional for chronic stubborn back pain. And even the movement prescriptions for back pain, as you would know, are pretty horrendous. They're not looking at pelvic movement. They're looking at training a core, and I just, so I think there's so much that could be up-leveled in that space. And that's really my mission.
Very good. Well, I look forward to watching your mission take off. And
Cool.
And I've really enjoyed this. I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing the style of work that you use in how you bring anatomy and motion, the flow motion model, into your work, how you combine it with so many other things. It's just been a joy to listen and learn. So thank you for that.
Thanks for the opportunity, Rocky. I love what you're doing, because one of the things about AIM that I think is so amazing is its ability to be pulled in 100 different directions by the beautiful, everyone's so unique in what they want to bring to a body, and there's no right way. And I love the forum because I see how different people are interpreting it and the directions they're taking it. And, I think that's the beauty of the model. So I'm looking forward to hearing what other people are doing with it, because, it's good and it's open to that.
Excellent. Well, thanks again. If you'd like to find out more information about the flow motion model, anatomy and motion courses, or Gary Ward himself, pick up a copy of his book, What the Foot, at findingcenter.co.uk. And while you're at it, pick up a copy of my book, Return to Center, where I take the flow motion model and apply it to strength training and conditioning. You can get a copy of that at rockysnyder.com. Thanks for listening.